The work ultimately begins with two acts of desecration of nature. The one we see is Alberic cursing love and wresting the gold from the bottom of the Rhine. The one that we don't see is, but we hear about later, is Wotan tearing a branch off the world ash tree, which is, symbolic of the harmony of nature, and getting worldly power through this staff, this spear that he carves from the tree. From that moment, the tree starts to wither. So the arc of the whole story has this cosmic sense of nature somehow brought to heel and finally being killed by the action of the characters in the story. Wagner was also insistent, even though he's writing about gods and dwarves and giants and human beings in the story, he was also very concerned that everyone identify with Wotan. So there is this, and it was certainly George Bernard Shaw's interpretation of the story, that it was actually a piece about class and about power, and power within human society. And that's certainly central to the interpretation that we're exploring in this production.
Well, The Ring is about relationships between Sieglinde and Siegmund, or Siegfried and Mima, and they're all archetype relationships that we recognise in our own life. I mean, sometimes it's a mother and a son, or it's between two lovers, or it's between a father and a son. All these things we can recognise, and Wagner certainly wanted to make a point about society and where it's got to and where it should be going, in the sense of, it was a very stiff society in his period, very strict and lots of rules of how you should behave. Now, he felt as an artist that should be broken a bit. Of course, we have broken it now. We're much freer than we used to be. We're allowed to do things which our parents probably think are terrible. And that's what the piece is about, is trying to show where humanity could be going and maybe where they should be going. That's what Wagner's really talking about. He goes back to the beginning, like Space Odyssey 2000. He goes back to the very beginning of life, talks about what happened at the beginning, and then moves on from there right through The Ring and ends up with a hopeful situation.
The Ring has a fascination for audiences of all ages and from very different backgrounds, and it has done so ever since Wagner created it and ever since it was produced. It speaks to people on many levels. People become fascinated by the narrative. The music is absolutely extraordinary. It's incredibly beautiful music, unbelievably well constructed. And I think every time you see The Ring, you find something else in it. It has many, many layers, and I think that's part of the fascination for audiences.
It's really, I suppose, a question of how you frame the images of the work. This is a very deliberately modern production set in a very theatrical world, but a very contemporary theatrical world. We're playing with theatrical tropes from across the last century, I suppose. Different ways of framing action, of framing personality, and particularly framing theatrical transformation. But we're starting with this beautiful kind of sea of humanity who are there at the beginning, from whom the gold is stolen, and who are there at the end, and watching ultimately the story unfold like the audience who are in front of them. So there's a kind of innocence, I suppose, that is at the heart of this idea, to which we return through Valkyra and then again in Götterdämmerung. In Rheingold, this group of people are enslaved with this kind of process of creating industry and creating wealth out of the minerals. They're all forced into servitude. Then in Valkyra, there's this sense of this war that is raging for wealth, and they start as at the beginning of Act 3 as a mass of refugees, and the image of refugees kind of searching for a safe haven is one that's not at all unfamiliar in our world. It's into this space that the 8 Valkyries ride, and then into which Brunhilde rides with the pregnant Sieglinde. And then we see them in the most beautiful moment of innocence, which takes us back in a sense to the Rheingold, which is when they come on and cheer Siegfried off on his journey. There's this great piece of music, the Rheinfahrt, where Siegfried journeys down the Rhine sort of full of hope. And Kate Champion has choreographed this wonderful sort of flash mob dance. And we're working with a lot of volunteers who are not at all trained performers, because we wanted to have the energy of real people in a large gathering on stage. They do this kind of mass dance, which is just the right sort of moment of innocence and optimism, I think, at that moment of the work before it all turns sour.
And I think though it's long, the audience fall into it in the end. At the beginning they're thinking, oh gosh, how long is this going to go on for? But in the end they get sucked into this world, and it takes you over. And you don't realise, you forget time basically, which is pretty amazing.